The final frontier begins.
This is about saving the future of humanity.
This is a huge victory for the good guys.
You've never seen Voyager.
Commitment to this course of action is not emotional.
Scotty, beam us up.
Welcome to another episode of Beam Me Up, a Star Trek podcast. I am Brent Allen, and I have seen every episode of Star Trek 47 times.
And I'm Matt Sonnenberg, and this is my first time through the series.
And this is the show where we are on a mission to introduce people to the universe of Star Trek by watching in air date order what we consider to be the most important episodes that deal with the lore, the history, and the timeless message of Star Trek.
Well, these episodes are great. We would love it if you go check out all our extra material, which you can find over at YouTube. It's all about behind the scenes, the flubs, the mistakes. Yes, there are mistakes, all sorts of things that we do with this show that we don't put in the final edited version of the podcast. It's all over on YouTube. You should go check it out sometime. You can find our YouTube channel by going to beammeuppod.com and clicking on the little YouTube icon in the upper right-hand corner. We'll see you there.
Today's episode is the 21st episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine Season 5, entitled Soldiers of the Empire, or as I like to call it, How Martok Got His Groove Back. In case you didn't watch this one first, in this episode, General Martok takes his first command since returning from the Gamma Quadrant, and his first officer, Worf, must choose between his loyalty to his commander and his loyalty to the crew. Now, Matt, we're going to get into this episode. We'll talk about the A plot, and that'll probably be it, because
we'll talk about the lack of a B plot.
Yes. But before we get into all that, we'll talk about, I've got a couple character actor spotlights, which I think are very fun.
Sure.
A couple little behind the scenes. But before we get into all of that, right here at the front, you've just watched Soldiers of the Empire for the very first time. Give us that first initial reaction. What'd you think?
This might be the best Klingon episode I've watched.
Right? I know, right?
I still don't know that I'm a fan of Klingon episodes. Or maybe even Klingons in general. I don't know. But this might be the best Klingon episode we've watched.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like this episode. In fact, my next note was, I like this episode. It's one of the best Klingon episodes.
Okay.
That's exactly what I wrote.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, if this is one of the best, like I said, I don't know that I'm really ever going to like Klingon episodes or love Klingon episodes, but this is definitely the best one so far.
Yeah. This one is probably the one that makes me appreciate the Klingons as a people group. More so than just about any other Klingon episode. I think this one, and it's exactly the way the episode was designed. It made the Klingons more human.
Yeah. I think I have a few notes throughout this whole thing. It's like, that really, I mean, it gave us a deeper look into how they operate and kind of made more sense out of why Worf is the way he is, or why he says certain things, or the other Klingons that we see from time to time, why they do the things they do. Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. And what happens when you don't live up to your expectations as a Klingon person and you got to keep moving. Anyway, it's good. I got to tell you, Matt, this was not an episode when I was going through my initial thinking through of this that I was like, yeah, that's going to be one that's in there. Not at all. There are reasons it's here. We'll discuss those. But it was actually Jeff Aiken, the guy who did the Charting the Course episode with me for season 5, who really pushed for this episode, as well as a few others this season. In many ways, because it's almost like we're sort of knowing what's to come and how things are getting ready to play out. There's a little bit of this is sort of like setting the stage. And if you notice, several of the episodes we've done recently, like there was one with Cisco, there was this one with Bashir last week. This one here with Martok, where they've informed the character, and they're going to inform who this person is going forward. And that's really what makes it a necessary piece. Because otherwise you're just going to see them and be like, wait, how did they get to that point in their life? So if you think of this as like a chess match, this is the part of the game where we're setting the pieces in place. You know what I mean? And it's all about to just knock down. So it's been interesting to watch there. I don't know if you had those thoughts while you're going of like, why? Yeah, this is a cool episode, but why this one? And we'll get into some of that as well. Matt, I got a couple character actor spotlights. Why don't we hit them very fast? This won't take very long at all.
Go for it.
I promise. The first one I want to mention, just bring him back because we haven't really talked about him a ton. We have already talked about him, but General Martok is played by J.G. Hertzler. I want to make sure you just know that name. You get that locked in. J.G. Hertzler, Martok. Put those two together. Just want to shout him out here. The next one I want to mention, I have one of the actors, and then I want to talk about somebody else real quick. Leskett. He was kind of the older guy. He was the guy at the con, the helm, who's like laying stuff in.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Quick clarifying question.
Yes.
Leskett and I always forget how to pronounce this one. Ordekin.
Yep.
Different people.
Yes.
Okay. Because some wires got crossed in my head somewhere.
As far as who was who.
Yeah. And towards the end of the episode, things didn't quite make sense because I had it noted as one guy and then they mentioned him later and it's a different guy. I'm like, oh, wait, what? Huh.
Yeah. We'll talk about the ending because there was a bit of a flub with that they just sort of left in. And
okay.
We'll talk about that.
Maybe that didn't help.
No, I'm sure it didn't. But Leskett, like I said, he's kind of looking like the older one, although he wasn't really that old.
Mm-hmm.
But he was just sort of the guy who was, like I said, sitting at the helm. It's like, he's going to crash us all. I don't care. That was played by a guy named David Graff. Matt, do you know the name David Graff?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, Voyager fans out there who have watched all of the shows may remember David Graff from his season 2 episode, The 37s, which Matt, you and I skipped for very good reasons. It's not a good episode, but he was in that episode. He played Frank Noonan, I think was his name, something like that. But Matt, where most people will remember him from, if you can in your head take off all that makeup off of his face, and the one you will see, well, I'm going to give it to you because I'm pretty sure you're going to know this one. You might not. We'll see. It's Sergeant Eugene Tackleberry from the Police Academy movies.
Oof. I've seen those once, maybe twice.
Yeah.
I don't know the characters that well.
That might be just a smidge before your time.
Yeah.
Perfect in my time. You and I aren't that far apart, but this is probably just far enough apart.
I think honestly, yeah, those are movies I had to pick up when I first had my Netflix subscription.
Yeah. But Sergeant Tackleberry. So anybody who is a fan of the Police Academy movies, that's who's playing this guy. That's the only reason I'm bringing him up, just because he was that guy. All the other ones, they certainly have little bits and nods, but nothing super good. I do want to talk about the director. Let's talk about the director. Did you happen to notice who it was for this episode?
Nope.
Our very own LeVar Burton.
Okay.
He is back to direct this episode. I like the fact that LeVar got to direct this episode, which is a heavy Worf episode, a heavy Michael Dorn episode, his buddy from TNG. I do like that. Matt, the only thing that I have for you as far as how this episode came to be, it's almost a little anecdote. Basically, Ira Stephen Bear went to Ronald D. Moore. I was like, hey, write me an episode that's all about Klingons. Like, you could just title it Star Trek Klingons and just be that. And it went through a couple of iterations, and this is eventually what we came up with for Klingons. That's why it's all there's nothing here about the crew on Deep Space Nine.
No, I was honestly surprised how little they showed up.
Yeah. Like Quark wasn't even in this one at all. Jake Sisko wasn't in this one at all. The other ones barely made any sort of appearance.
Like Sisko gave his blessing.
Yep.
Like O'Brien, Kira, who else was it? Bashir.
Mm-hmm. Miles was in there somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. Like they had extra work to do because Worf was gone and they were complaining about it. Like that was their, I mean, there's your B plot, I guess.
Whatever. Week off for the actors is really what that was.
Yes.
Of course, Jadzia winds up going with them on the trip. Even Ronald D. Moore was like, yeah, that's really just because I needed another Starfleet voice to be able to talk to Worf. Mm-hmm. And that would sort of stand in, and she was the one who honestly made the most sense. So, Matt, all that out of the way, that's really it. I told you it would go pretty quick. I'm going to kind of hand it over to you to let you take us through this episode as you see fit. Take as long as you need to. We'll talk about the A plot, but first let's start with any specific character plot points or character moments that you want to shout out.
They really should have a better way to get blood out of the carpet by now. I mean, Bashir's in there complaining it'll take days to get the blood out of the carpet. I'm like, okay, if you say so, sir. Yeah. I don't know how intentional this was, but I feel they kind of tipped their hand at where this episode was going to end up. because in the beginning, we got Dax's very thorough explanation of the Klingon social military hierarchy thing that I've kind of heard before, at least heard pieces of it at different times, but she just kind of spills it out in 30 seconds and says, this is how it works. And you know, they have a very specific order and how things work. And like, okay, you wouldn't be telling us this if it wasn't going to play a major role in this episode. And of course it did.
I mean, I always figure that's the, hey, for people who haven't been watching and don't really know anything, and even people who haven't been keeping up, here's what you need to know before we go into this. Okay, good.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. But that's what I'm saying is that, yeah, I understand why they had to do it, but they had to do it because it was such an important part of the episode. Sure. Therefore, I knew that was going to play a big role in this episode.
It was real. I was gonna say that's what you call exposition, and it just has to come out. It just has to come out.
It was really weird to hear Worf call her Jadzia.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Jadzia. I don't know if I just haven't heard it before, but it just something felt weird. I mean, I guess most people, no. Like I could hear like Bashir calling her Jadzia maybe, but like Cisco more often than not is old man.
Right.
I always refer to her as Dax, even though Jadzia is probably more accurate. But yeah, I just don't like you call her Jadzia a lot.
I do because she's Jadzia to me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I guess between myself and other members of the crew that I can think of that regularly talk to her and use her name or a name for her, I guess not that many of them call her Jadzia, and just
a lot of it's Dax,
something with Worf's voice then too, just to kind of hear that.
Yeah.
It's just because I mean, now that they're dating, we see them more outside of, you know, the command structure.
Well, yeah, right? you see the personal conversations between them.
Yeah. And so then it's Jadzia.
Yeah.
And it's not. Oh, that's the other one we get. We would normally get like lieutenant or commander or whatever she is.
I think she's lieutenant commander. Yeah.
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 But I mean, like Worf, a lot of folks, especially in this episode too, referred to him as commander, right? Mm-hmm. Don't use any name, just a title. And so that happened a lot on the bridge, right? You just use those titles, captain, commander, all those things. And so you get that a lot too. And so just to hear, I don't know, it was weird. Something struck me as this is odd, something I don't usually hear.
Matt, I want to pause on this just for a second, because here on the main show, we really haven't run into much Worf and Jadzia like at all, really.
Yep.
And a part of including this episode in the run was hey, we've not really done any Worf Jadzia episodes. So this would have been like your introduction into it. Now, your actual introduction to them as a couple happened a couple of weeks ago on our extra viewing episode, Looking for Parmark in All the Wrong Places, which if anybody out there would like to go listen to that, you can just go over to Beam Me Up Pod at Patreon. Just go to patreon.com and search for Beam Me Up Pod, and I'll take it. Or just go to patreon.com/Beam Me Up Pod, I think is the URL. And it's real cheap. It's like $1 a month or something, $2. I don't know, whatever it is. But you get the extra viewing episodes that Matt does. And so that's where you actually got introduced to them as a couple. Mm-hmm. But since we haven't done it here on the main show, for those who didn't catch that episode, talk to us a little bit about your thoughts on Worf and Jadzia just as a couple. How are you feeling about that? Even or just update us after watching this episode about seeing them together as an actual real life couple. Well, real life, quote unquote.
It's still awkward, but it's growing on me.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah.
Like Worf is still super awkward about everything.
Because he's Worf and he's super awkward. I mean,
because he's Worf, sure. But I mean, I think we may have mentioned this at one point. Like, I think Jadzia would be comfortable dating anybody and she'd be good. Like, it would just come naturally to her. Whereas that's what I'm saying. Like, Worf is going to be awkward with anybody, but like it just, I don't know, that juxtaposition between how natural it feels for her and looks for her compared to his innate awkwardness. And then just, you put them together and it's like magnified so many times.
Right. And in that way, like you definitely see where Worf needs Jadzia. Mm-hmm. I'm not so sure that I always see why Jadzia needs Worf, but she just loves him. You know, like, but she's totally cool with him exactly being how he is, you know?
Yeah. So, and I think she loves exploring the Klingon culture and everything. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I'm part of me wonders how much of this did she know before she started dating Worf?
Well, she remember she
how
did.
much research has she done since that time?
No, but remember, Matt, we have explored that, and I've given you those episodes. Blood Oath, where Curzon was a big person in the Klingon world, and she had that blood oath with those 3 other Klingons from the original series. We saw a couple of other episodes where Jadzia has shown her love and affinity for the Klingons and knowing their culture. Most of that came through her experience with Curzon, and it's almost in a little bit of a way like when a parent has a particular fandom for a sports team or Star Trek, and they pass it along to their kid. That's almost how I feel about it. Like it was Curzon's thing, and now it's become Jadzia's thing.
Yes,
you know,
and so I think you make a good point there. Like Dax has a very deep relationship and knowledge of Klingons.
Yes,
but I think Jadzia having those memories has kind of made that choice. Like, hey, I want to explore that further for myself,
for herself. Yeah.
And have those experiences firsthand and not just the memories of them.
Yeah, that's fair. And that right there might be the reason why I constantly refer to her as Jadzia, because I don't want to confuse Jadzia with any of the other Dax hosts and symbiotes.
And that's what I was saying. Like, I think calling her Jadzia is probably more accurate, but
I mean, the most accurate would be Jadzia Dax.
Yes. Jadzia doesn't come off the tongue quite as cleanly.
That's a beautiful name. I really love that name. I tried to get my wife to name my daughter Jadzia. I really did, because I think it's a gorgeous name. She said no.
Yeah, obviously. But yeah, I like the name Dax.
Yeah.
And I think it works. Like, and I don't know, it's just so much easier to say.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I kind of gravitate in that direction.
Fair.
But yeah, I understand in most cases using Jadzia makes more sense.
Before we move on from Jadzia, can we just talk about how much she holds her own on this ship? Like, when I specifically compare her to when Riker went on the Klingon ship, if you remember that, from all the way, like Riker was like, yeah, I'm going to eat this big bowl full of gach, and Jadzia is like, bring me more. And I brought blood wine with me. And the one line where she had against, was it Keswick? I can never, Leskit, where she says, my bed is as empty as yours, but the difference is mine is empty by choice.
Yep.
Bam.
I mean, everything she does, like I said, there are times when I feel she is a better Klingon than Worf.
Say it again, Matt. It's what I was getting ready to say. Say it again.
Jadzia Dax is a better Klingon than Worf. Like that, she's done her research. She has those memories. Yep. She knows how to handle herself and is not afraid to handle herself amongst the Klingons.
I mean, so not to fast forward too much, but even in this episode, she knows when Martok makes a decision to not go do something that it's wrong.
Yep.
It's not Klingon. It's wrong as a Klingon. And Worf is all hemming and hawing about what to do. Oh, what should I do? And she's the one who has to go to him and go, be a Klingon.
Yep.
Be a Klingon.
And
she can't do it herself because she's not Klingon.
Write this off.
Yeah.
To, this is Worf acting slightly out of character so we can, make our lesson, right? For this episode, because even after she did that the first time, he still didn't quite get it.
Yeah.
And like she had to come back a second or third time before Worf actually stepped up and said, okay, and then I'll have this talk and we'll do something about it. And like, it didn't click right away. It didn't sink in. And yeah,
that's because Worf's not a good Klingon. We've known this since Next Generation days. Like he doesn't really he tries to be so hard to be Klingon that he's not a Klingon, and he struggles with that Federation, obey the command structure and do this. And then, there's this honor. I can't disobey. That would be dishonorable. And no. You've got to kill him.
And I loved that line in there Jadzia gave him. that, this is not a Federation starship.
Yeah.
This is a Klingon bird of prey.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I don't think she mentioned it right there, but you have been relieved of all your Starfleet duties for the time being. Like Cisco let you go. You are Klingon. Do Klingon things. Don't use your Federation mind right now.
Mm-hmm.
That has no part here. And I like you said, everything just came so naturally to Jadzia.
Mm-hmm. Can we talk about Worf not being a good Klingon a little bit more?
Sure.
How about Worf not being able to read a room? Okay. He walks onto the ship, you have no victories. And as horrible as you are, you're not worthy of my life's blood, but I'll defend you anyway. And then like they get going and here's Martok. And all of a sudden he starts up the song and they're like, yeah, okay, whatever. And he's just like, Worf, dude, read the room, man.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah.
Because it made 2 appearances. This little
the Warriors anthem. The Warriors anthem. The sea shanty. The Klingon sea shanty. I love it.
It is.
That's what it is.
They made the whole point. Jadzia made the whole point before.
Yeah.
It's like it's like going onto a pirate ship.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You're not. It's not a luxury cruise. Right. You're cramped quarters. You're fighting over each other and like just. Yeah. And so like when he comes in with the sea shanty, I'm like, okay, makes sense. But I did want to ask about that, like, because of how long they let it play out both times.
Mm-hmm.
And it was purely in Klingon, which I'm sure someone has a translation for somewhere. But have we heard that before? Should that mean anything more to me? Or was it just the general feeling of, for lack of a better reason, camaraderie?
I mean, I'm going to go with the B one, camaraderie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll let you leave it there.
I'll say this about the song, though. I haven't heard a song that great since the Fine Brew of the Jolly Green Dragon from Lord of the Rings. Merry and Pippin singing it in the thing. Like I kind of want to learn that song. Like that's a, that's a kicking song once you get everybody into it. I love Martok's part in the second part is Mokcha, like right in the middle of it, like on beat.
Mm-hmm.
Love it.
I was impressed though that Dax did join in right away when Worf tried to start it up.
She did or didn't? Did. Yeah.
She once again did her research or pulled up an old memory. Maybe I don't know if it's a common song or not.
Right.
I mean, by the end, I guess we found out everybody knew it, so can't be too obscure. It was really random. I felt that Tavana had knowledge of Curzon.
Why?
Like, how would that even come up? Like, I mean.
Because I mean, this is well established. If I can answer that for you, Matt.
Yeah.
And maybe just head off your question. They have established that Curzon's name is very well known among Klingon society and is very, very highly spoken of.
Okay.
And Klingons live for a long time, as do most people in the future. So, Jadzia has only been Curzon for 5 years now, maybe 6. Okay. So it's not been that long ago, but still Curzon's name is very well regarded, among Klingons, especially as someone who's not a Klingon. So
fair enough. I guess that does help lessen the obscurity there. But yeah, other than that, like you kind of already brought it up already. Like Jadzia is just a really good Klingon.
She's better than Worf, right?
And so like every time we cut away from Worf and Martok and went to Jadzia, I'm like, all right, this shows how it's done. Like this is Klingon life. This is how, like when she throws the guy away from the table. Yeah. Right. It's like, this is my seat.
Right.
And I'm like,
I like her line. She goes, perhaps you haven't heard, but my name is Dax. Okay.
But yeah, I mean, seriously, like as soon as she walked into the room, I had no doubt something was about to go down.
Sure.
I didn't know exactly what, but yeah, just takes the guy, throws him to the ground and it's like explains, no, that's my seat.
Matt, I want to ask you this. We've watched a lot of Ferengi episodes.
Yeah.
And as abhorrent as much of the Ferengi culture is, you and I have both stated there are some elements of the Ferengi culture which are actually transferable and are not bad.
Sure.
Particularly when it comes to business sense and different things like that you love. Actually, that makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
You know, is there anything about Klingon culture, maybe even coming out of this episode, you know, out of all the Klingon stuff that you've gotten to know them pretty well, I think over the last couple of years, is there anything out of Klingon culture that you're kind of like, we could maybe do with a bit more of that in this culture, or that actually makes a lot of sense when I'm with them? You know, the idea of Jadzia walking into a room and establishing herself right away or something like that. Like, what do you think? Anything jump out at you?
In general, no. The only thing I can think about right now that I can maybe manipulate into a positive that maybe we should do more of, is being straightforward and to the point. Don't beat around the bush.
Yeah.
Like that's the only thing I can come up with at that right now.
That's
but
fair.
Honestly, yeah, the rest of Klingon culture,
Just
as fun as it might be to watch,
right?
Like I can't say that I agree with or would want to see more of in my own culture.
Fair enough.
But that might be it for individual moments.
I got one more that I want to add.
Go for it.
Nog getting caught in between Worf and Martok.
Man.
Excuse me. I'd like to get by now. Nog was great in this episode. He was there for no reason but pure comic relief, and he did it beautifully.
I mean, can I just clarify there? Like that was Nog and Worf on some kind of like engineering project.
Well, they were on the Defiant, and remember Worf's Worf's in command of the Defiant. Okay. So Worf's fixing up his ship a little bit.
That didn't click at all.
Yeah, and I think
that makes a whole lot more sense now.
I think something that you might have missed, Nog as a cadet is on like his internship apparently, or like he's on like permanent detachment or something, or long-term detachment to Deep Space
on the
Nine.
Defiant.
Well, to Deep Space Nine specifically.
Oh, okay.
So like he's like getting his field training or stuff there at Deep Space Nine. Like this is part of his cadet. So he's around a lot more, but he's a cadet and he's in his cadet uniform, obviously.
Yeah.
So, you know, Nog is around these days.
Cool.
So, and that's why he's there. So, no, I'm sorry. I did need to talk about one because this is its own thing and it's a big moment. It's at the very end of the episode. Worf joins the House of Martok.
Yeah.
An honored house, not a disgraced house. Takes off his father's emblem and puts on Martok's. Doesn't add it. It's not a second one. Takes the one off and replaces it. It's a big moment.
I was going to say, like, I don't know that I fully grasp how big that is. Like, I understood it was big because like you said, he removed the other one. Like, so like, okay. There's another question too. I think he had a second emblem above that one. Do we know what that is?
I am not entirely sure what that emblem is. I know what you're talking about. Because the one that he took off is the one that is his father's, you know, the House of Moog sign. I'm not entirely sure what that other one is. Maybe it's his.
They zoomed in on his chest there multiple times, and he definitely had a second thing up there. And it's not like the comm badge or something like that,
right?
But they didn't address it in this episode. But it's something that, you know, he didn't take off either. So
yeah, I almost want to say it has something to do with just overall Klingon stuff, but it's not in, like, you don't see it in his TNG uniform stuff, and you don't even see it in all of his Deep Space Nine stuff. So that, you know, those things do change, I guess, depending on the costume, but I'm really not sure what that is.
If they hadn't made a point of it in this episode, I don't think I would have noticed either of those two things there.
Right.
Because they're like the same color as his sash. And so like they just kind of blend in on an everyday basis. But when they point them out, it's like, oh yeah, you do have shapes there. I guess I'm still kind of wondering how the mechanics of this work. Like, how do you bring someone into your house?
I think we just saw it. I think that's it.
But I mean, like, can we compare that to something? I guess is what I'm saying. Like, is he like adopting him as a son?
That's pretty much it. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I mean, does Worf
maybe not a son
then?
Maybe not a son, but more like a nephew or like a cousin. Like Worf would not take over the house of Martok when Martok dies. I keep waiting for Worf to just have his own house, to be the house of Worf.
Mhm.
Like that's honestly what I keep waiting for him to. And spoiler alert, this doesn't actually happen. But I think it should shed the house of Moog and be
I
about
think
you.
he just did that.
Well, he did now, but he's under the house of Martok. But there is a thing about if you remember in Klingon society, when a person is disgraced, it not only follows that person, but it follows their son and their son's sons. And I want to say it went out to 4 generations. I don't think it went out to 7. I want to say it went out to 4 generations. So even the house of Worf, because the house of Moog is a disgraced house.
Yeah.
Like it had a little bit of grace for a while, but then it got disgraced again. And so now Worf is coming under the house of Martok. He's joining that clan. He's pledging his allegiance. He's joining that deal, and he'll operate under the rules and obligations of that house, but he gets to enjoy the honors of what's being associated with that house.
Sure.
So, and I mean, I think Martok says that we'd welcome you as a brother, into the house. So, the way that I always think about it is, and I know you haven't watched Game of Thrones, but Game of Thrones has all these different great families, and it's very reminiscent of the old like King Arthurian type, maybe a little post that, but that old family name type thing that you think of when you think of medieval England and stuff. And it kind of, he's in that house now.
That's where we get all of our surnames nowadays.
Most of them. Yeah.
Like Johnson was son of John.
Exactly.
And the story my mom always tells when they're going through this with their dad, and it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. And Larson, son of Lar. Oh no, okay.
Larry, son of Larry. That's what it was. Larson. This is the proud patriarch of our house, Larry. He's a cucumber with plungers for ears. Anyway,
that's exactly where my mind went to.
For anyone out there who doesn't know what we're talking about, please go look up VeggieTales. It's amazing. Anyway, so as far as the overall story, though, I guess, Matt, that A plot, because it really was the only one, of Martok taking command of the ship.
Mm-hmm.
He's having a hard time doing really what he should do. The ship is sort of a cursed ship, as they say, and Worf
depends who you talk to.
Sure. But Worf's got to, he has to eventually get beat over the head by his girlfriend to finally like step up, and he forces Martok into a challenge to reignite the Klingon spirit inside Martok. And it, spurs on the ship to its first victory in a long time. And yeehaw, here we go. Like, how'd you feel about this? This is a story in just overall.
It was okay.
For a Klingon episode.
Yeah. Like by the time we got to the end of it, I'm like, okay, yeah, I should have seen more of that coming. Because like we had in our run here, we had just introduced Martok and said, hey, he's going to become a recurring character now. So I'm sitting here thinking, okay, Worf's like, well, if I take over, then Martok has to die. Like, well, we can't kill off Martok already unless Brent gave me the greatest red herring ever. Like, we can't kill off Martok yet. So I'm like, okay, Martok can't actually die. So how does this resolve? And honestly, I wasn't a huge fan of how it resolved. I wasn't a huge fan of, Worf lets his guard down, gets stabbed, and all of a sudden the whole crew is cheering Martok. Right. Like, really? I could see that if Martok killed Worf, they'd be cheering. But I don't know. This is one of those situations where I do not envy the writer's position because I don't have a better way to do it, to go about it. I couldn't come up with a way that made sense. And so they gave us something, but I kind of feel it was weak.
But there is the idea. And again, Matt, maybe this is just, I know where it's going kind of a thing. Or I know what happens with Martok and the crew of the Rotaran, because the Rotaran's going to be around. Okay. We may not spend a whole lot of time on the Rotaran. There are episodes that go to the Rotaran. I think we're probably going to miss most of those, but if it pops up, but just, Martok and his crew, the Rotaran, this is it. They'll be around. Mostly it's Martok though. Right. But seeing Martok re-engage You know what I mean? Like when Martok becomes who Martok should be, with one eye, and just this kind of bad A, Klingon, like when they're singing that song a second time at the end, and everybody's joining in, and Martok's, and they come back and open 15 barrels of blood wine for the first victory of the Rotaran.
Martok's last speech to Cisco.
Yeah.
Or no, it wasn't even Cisco. It was Kira.
I think it's Kira. Yeah. Over the comm. Yeah.
Takes the call. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah.
That was great to see Martok back.
Right.
Yes. But other than that, like how we got there was
But what about the idea, like Worf? Like Worf goes in and he stages a mutiny, knowing that he's going to drop the fight. He's going to drop this fight, and he might get killed. All at the,
Yeah, and I'm glad they kind of answered that for me, because I had a lot of questions going into the last 3 minutes of this episode. But I called it way early on, right after the first time Martok avoided the conflict, right? Yeah. Because they hinted at it then, like the whole crew was kind of giving him looks, and it's like, I wrote down, I don't think this will end well for him. Someone, perhaps Worf, will have to take his position. And obviously that's what they pushed towards. And then I loved your AKA how Martok got his groove back. Yeah. Like that's it. That's this episode. Yes. But Worf's part in that, like I said, I was wondering if there was an off-screen conversation between Martok and Worf we didn't see. They didn't seem to suggest that, so I wasn't sure. But
well, I mean, they had the conversation that they had on screen later, where Martok comes up to him. He's like, at first I thought you were being disloyal, but then I saw you were actually being the most loyal you could possibly be. And then he says, how did you know I wouldn't kill you? And Worf goes, I didn't. And,
and Worf answered all my questions.
Yeah. Like it was a real fight. Worf was going to drop it in the end, because the other thing at the beginning of the episode, we see Martok in Dr. Bashir's hospital, sick bay, whatever that is. I don't think it's sick bay on the station. What do they call it? Whatever it is. And like what we find out is Worf is the one who just beat the snot out of Martok. Like Worf can beat Martok, but Worf's going to go drop this match, and he's going to get stabbed in the kidney for it or whatever he gets stabbed in. And, but it's going to bring them all back. And to me, Matt, this is actually where I get into the Star Trek message, which I don't think this one's too terribly deep, but this actually goes back to me a little bit about when we did the movie First Contact several weeks ago now at this point, where we talked about don't be a great man. Don't try to be a great man. Just be a man. If you remember that conversation. Yeah. And this is a little bit for Worf. Like Worf doesn't have to try to be a great Klingon. He just needs to be a Klingon. And I said in the intro, and I kind of stole this from the Star Trek description, that Worf has to choose between his loyalty to his commander versus his loyalty to the crew. But I found that wasn't really the case. By doing what he did, he was actually being loyal to both his commander and his crew at the same time. Like by doing his job as the first officer to kill Martok, to kill the commander for being a coward, even though on the surface it looked like it was disloyal, it was actually the most loyal thing he could do, even if it was at his own expense. He was able to let his pride down / honor, if you want to replace it with that word. He was able to let that fall. And in the end, he winds up getting this even greater honor by being able to join the House of Martok. So I think this is Star Trek just saying, go karma, do the right thing, and it'll come back to you. Like, I think that might be what the message is here, if they're trying to say anything at all.
I mean, but that's basically what Jadzia was encouraging him to do the entire time.
Yeah. But just be a Klingon, be you. But I love that idea that, man, this is a really tough thing to do because it feels yucky, but it's my duty. Like it was his duty as first officer to challenge Martok. And now he could have powered up on Martok and killed him and taken over control of the Rotaran, and they would have been shouting Worf, Worf, Worf at the end of the show instead of Martok, Martok, Martok. But Worf found a way to do something actually that most Klingons would never do, to do it in the Federation style, the Federation manner of, if I fight him and win, then Martok dies and I take command of the crew. But if I fight him and I lose, and it reignites Martok's desire, and all of a sudden he gets set up to be this great commander, and then Worf can go off to the administrations of Dr. Bashir and be fine. Like That's the best win. Even if it makes his name, because it's Worf and Worf can't have a good name, right? Even if it means, he gets branded as a mutineer or something like that. Like I love that. And I'm glad that it didn't land that way for Worf, that it still ended the way it did.
Sure.
That's all I got.
Fair enough. I forgot to mention earlier.
Oh yeah.
We got a line of, that was opposite what we usually hear, right? But this time it was from a Klingon, and we usually just hear it from Worf.
Right.
Today would be a bad day to die.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait.
Mm-hmm.
You mean all Klingons don't say today would be a good day to die all the time, every time?
Yeah.
Like there is a bad day to die? Okay. Interesting.
Mm-hmm. You don't want to do this today. It would be a bad day to die. Yeah. Yeah. We got that one. So, hey, confusing ending a little bit. I don't know if this was what you were talking about earlier, but there's this scene at the end during the mutiny when Worf looks over to Jadzia and nods to her. She hits a few buttons, and a few seconds later, this group of Klingons just burst in brandishing weapons.
Mm-hmm.
And then we don't really know what they were there for. Yeah. Or what, it's sort of all convoluted. Well, what was supposed to be happening there was Dax was actually sending a message to Tavana's Parmakai. What was his name? Orticon? Yeah. Or whatever. She was sending a message to him about the mutiny, and he was coming in to stop the mutiny. But what we're supposed to understand is that they were coming in as the remaining soldiers on the ship, so that it was a way to get everybody on the bridge so they could see the fight that was about to happen and see Martok win, right? It was just sort of their way of luring them all in.
I was really confused about that too, because they definitely cut to Jadzia, and she hit some buttons and then nodded at Worf and was like, okay, we're set. Yeah. And wait, did you set the self-destruct or right. What'd you do?
Right. Did you send out a message? Yeah. So basically the production is looking at it once it's all said and done, and they're watching the episode back, and they're like, that doesn't really come across as what we actually meant, does it? We didn't say it, and it doesn't really translate that well. And they went, oh, well, just leave it in. That was their response. It didn't work out, but it's okay. Just leave it in.
Yeah. Yeah. So where I first got them confused was during the meal I guess it wasn't during the meal. Maybe it was after or something when they're all drinking and one of them gets all riled up and starts praising the Jem'Hadar or something. Mm-hmm. And I thought the entire time, it was Lesket talking, but then someone says later, Karnan attacked Ortican. And I'm like, wait, what? Mm. And so ever since then, I was really confused about who is who. Mm-hmm. But the final scene didn't help. That's for sure.
Right. Yep. So that was what I meant earlier when I said, hey, we'll talk about that confusing ending. So,
all right.
Matt, did you have anything else about this episode, Soldiers of the Empire?
I think that should do it.
All right, Matt. Well, that's also going to do it for me then as well. So I'll ask you the question. Did you like the episode? Is this one you'd want to watch again? And do you understand why it's part of our run?
It was okay. I'd watch it one more time.
Would you call this a laundry episode for you? If it was on, you'd let it play, but you'd be doing other stuff?
I could let it play. Yeah.
Yeah. Fair.
As for why it's part of our episode, our run, I guess, like I said, it kind of gives us that deeper look. Well, probably at Martok, I guess, mostly. Yeah. But maybe a little bit of a Worf too. A little bit of Worf. Yeah. And again, originally it was also hey, Worf and Jadzia. So I don't have to explain that to you, but mostly Martok, because it's going to set the stage for who Martok is, who the Rotaran is, all that sort of stuff. Cool. Things that I couldn't explain to you in 30 seconds. And that's our litmus test. If I can't say it in 30 seconds, then, let's watch the episode. So here we go. All right, Matt, would you like to know what we're watching next week? That would be useful.
Well, as I said, we're going to stay on Deep Space Nine for quite a while, and we are back on Deep Space Nine for one more week. And there's one more stop to set the stage for what is coming out. One more person I need you to meet that you haven't met this guy yet. That's one more person to meet. He's been around for a couple of episodes here and there, but I need you to meet this guy. The episode, it's the penultimate episode of the season called In the Cards. And I won't give you any warnings about what the episode's about, but I'll give you that. It's In the Cards. I do not have any extra viewing episodes for you though this week, Matt. And with that, that's officially going to wrap up the show. So what do you guys think about this episode, Soldiers of the Empire? Let us know. If you're over on YouTube, like and comment. Let us know what you think about this episode. But if you're not, if you're listening to the podcast You can email us at beammeuppod@gmail.com, or you can head over to beammeuppod.com for more ways to contact us. Matt, where can people contact you?
You can find me personally on Instagram and Twitter at As a Matter of Matt.
And if you guys want to contact me, I'm at Brent Allen Live across all the social medias. I'd love to connect with you there as well, too. Until next time, folks, live long and prosper.